Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Vikings Season 4, Episode 7, The Prophet and the Lost. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Vikings. I don't look at it from a historical perspective. I'm just a guy watching a scripted, narrative-based TV show and telling you what I think about it. So I have to give a spoiler warning for Vikings up to Season 4, Episode 7. If you haven't seen up to this point, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. So this episode was pretty exciting. Starts off with another battle episode as the Vikings attempt to invade Paris, and then goes on to give us some more political intrigue and what King Eparch is up to in England. So it was a pretty interesting episode, but not without its flaws. So, like the episode did, let's start in Paris, where Ragnar comes up with a strategy to attack Paris, and that is to drive the boat straight up the river through the guard towers. Finehair asks, isn't that what they'd be expecting? So Ragnar mentions that he'll also be sending another force to attack by land, to attack the archer towers so the ships can get by. Now, the first thing I'll say is that it seems to me that the force by land should have been much larger, and I think a large part of why they failed was because those archer towers remained intact. And despite Ragnar's assurances that they wouldn't be expecting an attack by land, it kind of seems like they were. But I suppose what they were trying to get at was the mud slowed them down and gave the Paris forces enough time to prepare for that attack. Now, I know that Ragnar wasn't expecting the chain thingy, which worked as expected in crippling their ships, but it seemed to me it should have sent a much larger force by land, since the whole plan hinged on taking down those archer towers. So, Rollo's plans seemed to go off without a hitch. The Paris forces prevailed with minimal losses, while as the Vikings suffered severe losses, as after their ships are taken down by the chain, they then catapult oil on them and then light their ships on fire with fiery arrows, which was very effective in defeating them. So Floki was drowning in the water and Ragnar saved him, so I wonder if this will come into play later on. And then, as they retreat, Ragnar screams at Rollo for his betrayal, because I think he knows the reason they were defeated was fully because of Rollo. But while they were away, their base camp was attacked as well. At first, I thought everyone left behind was killed, including Ragnar's son. But it turns out a group of them were hiding and managed to survive unscathed, including Ragnar's sons, his mistress, and Bjorn's wife. So all the important characters who were there, except for Helga, Floki's wife. In fact, for a while I thought she had died, and she was one of the bodies that they burned, so I thought that was quite a big step to kill off a character that's been there since Season 1. But it turns out I was wrong, as she isn't dead, as we saw her healing later on, so I think this means eventually she will be okay. So Ragnar is really starting to fall from grace. As Bjorn points out, the failure was his fault, and during the battle he was just being useless and Bjorn had to give the orders. And then after the defeat, what does he do? Drugs. In fact, he turns into a useless junkie, going around throwing shit because he needs his fix, and he's threatening Udo until she gives him his drugs. Tisk tisk Ragnar, he's really proving to be a disappointment. And after 3 days, Bjorn goes to him demanding that he gives an order to what to do, and finally, in a drugged out state, he says that they'll just retreat the next day. Now, somehow I doubt that they will actually end up retreating. I think Finehair and the others will not be okay with this, but we'll see. So, meanwhile in Paris, they're celebrating their victory over the Northmen, but Rollo warns not to celebrate too quickly, as this is just the beginning. But Odo seems to imply that Rollo is kind of biased towards the Vikings, but this doesn't sit well with his new wife nor the Emperor. In fact, when the Emperor told Odo that Rollo knows more about the Northmen than he does, this seemed to purposely insult Odo, which he didn't take too kindly to. In fact, I was kind of expecting Odo to make his move on Rollo during the battle, because that's what he said he'd do. But I suppose the battle never got hairy enough for that, and Rollo didn't betray them like he thought he would. But I do have to assume at this point that the Emperor has been made aware of Odo's latest plan to kill Rollo and dethrone the Emperor. So I'm sure that's where some of this animosity is coming from. So back in Norway, we see Haberd flirting with Aslog more, and then he goes around kissing all the women in the village who seem to be really taken with him, which seems a bit silly to me, but whatever. I think it's rather convenient that he only happens to show up after Ragnar and the others left for war, and funnily enough, Aslog even points this out. He claims that he had no idea that they were gone, but I'm not quite sure I'm buying that. And they still seem to be painting him as some sort of godlike figure, which I'm not really that interested in, as I'm not a fan of when the show goes all mystical and supernatural. Speaking of which, we get a silly scene where Haberd is having sex with Aslog, which somehow translates into a vision where Floki is having sex with Aslog while he's in Francia. And it switches back and forth between Floki and Haberd, and this was silly. It seemed to be implying Haberd was using like his magic to do this. But I'm not sure, I could be wrong about that. But I hope they aren't foreshadowing an affair between Floki and Aslog. Although I suppose that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but we'll see. So finally, let me get to England, where the forces of Wessex under King Akbar set out to Mercia, but instead of going straight into battle, Akbar meets in secret with the man they call W, who commands the largest force in Mercia. There, he denounces the current ruling council, saying they're a bunch of drunkards and idiots, but also questions the rule of Quinthris, saying she's mad, and so is anyone who supports her. Instead, he proposes that he joins forces with Akbar's forces in order to overthrow the ruling council and give Akbar the rule of Mercia, making him the king of Mercia and Wessex. Now, the first question is whether or not W is being sincere, or if this is part of a larger scheme. I tend to think that he's being sincere. The other question is, was Akbar planning this all along? I tend to think that he couldn't have been, because I don't think he could have foreseen this possibility. But I do think he will take full advantage of it now that it's presented itself to him. So this seemed to have been foreshadowed when Quinthris challenged Akbar that he not betray her. Now it looks like he will. That may also have something to do with why he sent his son away, because he knew that he might betray her, and since he became her lover, he didn't want him around to interfere with that. Maybe, I don't know, but I'm interested to see where they go with this, and more interested to see when the Vikings will actually return to England. The show is called Vikings after all, and now it's been over a season and a half since they've actually been in England, and we still get all these scenes in England. But, it doesn't look like they will return this half season, but I hope they do in the second half. So my rating for The Prophet and the Lost out of 10 is an 8, extremely good. This was a tense episode with a great battle sequence and some intriguing political intrigue. However, I really could have done without the silly mysticism. But overall, it promises great things to come in the show moving forward. So that's it for my review of The Prophet and the Lost. Be sure to check back here every week as I review episodes of Vikings, and also check out my channel for many other videos on shows like Game of Thrones, Star Trek, The Walking Dead, Better Call Saul, Daredevil, and more. And make sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.